operations is just decisions, three main decisions that your team and everybody knows, and you're all operating from those same decisions. And so when you're all operating from those same decisions and like all those decisions are already made, you know what to expect. It makes things predictable and it makes things less chaotic.
What is going on, everybody? This is Matt Darner, co-founder and CEO at CollBox, and welcome to the inaugural episode of What I Wish Law Firms Knew. New series that we're trying out here, and why. Basically, in my journey here at CollBox, which is a little accounts receivable business for law firms based in Austin, Texas, I've met a ton of amazing operators, both within law firms and without. And it turns out there's a lot more that goes into running a law firm than just your cash flow and your accounts receivable. And I've met a lot of great people in this journey. And I just kind of had this recurring feeling of, man, if the law firms that I'm talking to just met blank, just met this person, if they knew just this little thing about this topic that so many of my now dear friends are experts in, man, life would be a lot easier for them. So that is sort of the genesis of this series, What I Wish Law Firms Knew. And in this episode, I am super excited to kick things off with my good friend, Miki Wong. A little bit about her, though, before we get started, is that's sort of an interesting way we got started in knowing each other. Miki is actually, or was actually, one of our very first customers. She was at a large family law group in California, researched CollBox, vetted us, brought us onto the firm, and actually helped us land one of our very first clients. Her excitement for what we do actually helped get us going into legal years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, since then, she has spun out, and really, I'd say going back a step, she really made things happen on the operations side within that law firm. I think realized that she loves operations and wants to do that again for lots and lots of law firms, and has since spun out to run her very own shop called Otium. And I wanted to kind of bring her on here since she, in some ways, is sort of the beginning of our journey in legal at CollBox. I think it's very fitting that she gets to be the beginning of our journey on the What I Wish Law Firms Knew series. So
Yeah.
I want to welcome you, Miki Wong, my good friend from Otium, and tell us a little bit about yourself. Thanks for coming on.
Awesome. Hello everyone. Nice to meet you all. My name is Miki Wong, and yes, I totally fell into law firm operations, was not doing law firm operations before this. I was in the music industry singing and completely different from this, but I fell in love with the process, fell in love with figuring out problems, and really fell in love with creating impact for businesses. And uh, when I was able to find solutions like CollBox for the law firm, it felt so satisfying. I was like, yeah, okay, I did that. I did that. We figured out the problem and it's working and we're doing the thing. So really
Absolutely.
fell in love with that. And I've taken that excitement and passion towards solving business problems and starting my own fractional COO firm called Otium Advisors. And what we do is we help founders, law firm managing partners to figure out how to create the business that they want and not the business that's running their life. So a big part of what we do is the concept of Otium, which is living life like by choice and having leisure time and time to do the things that you really want to do and not be run by chaos, basically. So we're going to take like the most chaotic parts of your life, running your business and turning it into something that's like stable and reliable and like runs hopefully without you. So
I guess
that's
we're
the
signing up too, because no, I mean, no, I've always joked with you on that. Like what you do for law firms is like, I need that. We all need that, right? And I think that just like you, right? My background was not in legal, not even in accounts receivable, which is funny. I guess it is now, right? At some point, you have to just say
it
it is your
becomes the
background
background.
when you've done it for a really long time. Like, oh, a decade goes by. It's not my background. You're like, maybe it is, but but yeah, like you, I was in the creative space, studying video game design. I think we had some of that in
We
common.
did talk about
We're
that.
like art nerds who somehow ended up in running businesses and operations, like really falling in love with solving problems for people, right? And I came by way of sales and then landed, obviously as a business owner here at CollBox. And since then, right, just running the show all the time, it's funny. I jokingly say, is this really what I wanted? I was sort of a bad with authority sales guy. Like I could do it, I could do better stuff. And I wanted to touch multiple parts of the process, right? I couldn't stay in my lane. And that made me sort of a difficult employee at times, but I think excited
Right.
about these different things, right? And I think most founders tend to be difficult employees, right? And
Yeah.
that's sort of inevitability, right? Leads us to this, like running this crazy thing called a business. But man, certainly did I run into like every single pitfall possible, right? Just like every business owner does, of like, wow, payroll, how does that work? Accounting, okay. What are our workflows for this? Delivery of products, okay. Customer service for success, and then revenue growth and goals and KPI, blah, 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 blah. So it gets overwhelming fast. And, 10 years in, I'm still learning every single day. And I feel like, maybe this is a good lens for us to have this discussion through. My observation in meeting with tons of amazing attorneys and business owners, right, owners of law firms, is they're really the crux of their struggle, I think, comes from their ability or inability to take off the attorney hat and put on the business owner hat, right?
Yeah.
And not everyone's made for that. Some are, some aren't, and it can be learned, but it's really, really difficult. And I think, what you guys are doing is just so fantastic for that. But the knowledge that you gained living and working inside of that law firm, right? This is such an organic story, right? So talk
Yeah.
to me, maybe just zoom out for a second and just talk about that word operation. So title of today's episode, which we did not start in the beginning, but folks are seeing by clicking on it, is what I wish law firms knew about operations. So tell me what you think that word means. Let's unpack that for a minute.
I think you touched on something that's like really important. Oftentimes people look at operations and they see like all these different things that they need to do. And it's like, oh, how do I do payroll? How do I do delivery? How do I do this? And like it's a really good place to start. But I think a lot of times people think of operations as like this really big like complex thing, and it doesn't need to be. At the same time, everything kind of like works together in this like giant puzzle. And I think like oftentimes I run into people and they really focus on like the efficiency part of
Sure.
things. It's like, how do we get faster?
It's attractive, right? I think about
Yeah,
this
it's
a lot. How do we
attractive.
go? I
How do
was
we,
just making people annoyed at me this week. Well, how can we
right.
blah 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 do this faster? So
How do we do this faster? How do I make more revenue? And like I have a very, very different approach
mm,
to it. And I think like I've talked to you about this. And like the way that I think about operations that I think is a little bit different than most other people is that I really focus on how do we make someone's life easier? Which sounds crazy.
right.
Which
We're
sounds
here to work
crazy.
hard. What are you talking about, Mickey? No,
Yeah,
right.
right,
So,
right. Because like what I noticed when I was doing operations at this law firm was that like there would be times that I would evaluate a software and it's got all these really cool features. It's got all these things that it can do. And then like I put it in front of the team and the team is like, I don't want to do this.
right. You hit the
I
rubber
don't want
did,
to do this.
maybe did not meet the road, I guess, in that
Yeah,
example,
there
right?
and like it's a very natural human response.
Mm,
And I think a lot of times founders and people in my position, they'll kind of like push people through it and people will push through it, if you push them because their job is on the line
right.
and what they have to do it. They don't feel like they really have a choice. But what I found was that like when you bring your team into the process and you come from a place where you are trying to make their lives easier, they are sold. They're like, oh, you're gonna like cut down the time that it takes for me to do this.
Right.
Okay, yeah, I'm down for that. Like let's figure out how to make my job easier. And so I think coming from that place has really changed the way that I think about operations and
Mm,
has really changed the way that I kind of think about business in general. Because like like I've worked at jobs where it's like, someone comes in and they're like, this is how we're gonna do things now. And like you don't really have a choice in the matter. And like you either do it or like you kind of get fired. Like you don't really have
right.
a choice. And so like when you give people agency and the choice to kind of like tell you how to make their job easier, then like it's just so much easier for them to like want to step in and make that change because they're a part of the process.
Right, that
Of course you
buy-in
have
is
to.
so critical, right? Like, because I mean,
Yeah.
it's just funny just thinking about my career before running a business. Like, yeah, how many times did an executive come to me and say, "We're going to make your life easier"? Like that never happened once, right? Maybe literally never once. And why? Because it always felt really the opposite, right? Oh, well, I know now I'm on the other side of the table. I'm running a business, and I go through some of these interesting moments too with my staff, where I'm like, especially in sales, given that that's my background, when they they confront me with some like thing. Well, what about this discount or this or that? I'm like, oh my God, I was that sales guy. And that's now it's so frustrating because I'm balancing like our revenue and our growth against like being very customer centric, which is of course in my heart, like how I feel and what I care most about. But then I'm like burdened with sort of these other responsibilities. You're like, oh, this is sort of karmic justice. This is how I was to my boss. Like, and it's that's interesting and sort of a development opportunity. No, but yeah, I feel like so often it feels like we're really as a team member, as a staff member, right? We're so often just like the victims of these initiatives, right? And
Yeah.
and I think that's something that we as business owners lose sight of, right? I think this is a really important reminder um, because yeah, this is, you want to feel like your business is a family or a tight unit and you want that harmony. But, when you don't think about how your choices impact your team very thoughtfully, right? Even if it's great for the bottom line or X KPI,
Right.
whatever is most important,
Right.
that's going to disrupt that harmony. So I love that approach. I think it's a refreshing way to view it. And I think that, and I'm sure we're going to dig into it more, but there is a way to harmonize those things, right? And this idea that work does not have to be punishment, right? Ideally,
Right.
at least
Right.
livable, no, but certainly not
Yeah.
punishment. And ideally something you actually look forward to because you're contributing to something greater than yourself. And there's this team dynamic. And I think there that can exist, right? It's sort of rare, it feels like, unfortunately, but I love that that's really your thesis, right? Like how can we, I don't know, odium, right? I from our notes earlier, sort of Latin for freedom from work, but it's not exactly
Yeah.
what you mean though, right? It's sort of
Yeah.
that there is a freedom in there as well, right?
Yeah.
And I think that
There's
agency
like a choice.
concept is huge. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a choice. And like, as I build operations, right? I still look at the bottom line. I still
Of
look at
course.
the KPIs. I still look at those things. But that's kind of like where you get creative, where you're like, okay, how can we meet this goal of whatever this number is and make someone's life easier? Like how can we bridge those two things? And like, of course, you have to have some boundaries, right? And you're not going to be like, okay, this person wants to like, only work 2 hours a week, right? And like that's
Me
not
too. No, that's
well,
yeah, that's right. That's not
I
even
mean, if
true.
you're
That's
the
a
owner,
lie. I'm like
maybe.
a
But I mean, like
workaholic weirdo. But
for your team, there's obviously certain things that you want them to meet. But like really it's like when you shift from that come from, like when you shift the come from, you kind of like you start bringing in their opinions about it because like
mm,
as much as your business, you might not know their job as well as they do because they're
sure.
working and they're doing it every single day. They're taking whatever shortcuts that you don't know about because like
Right.
you shouldn't as the founder or anything like that. And that's where someone like me comes in and I will take a look and I will look at like, oh, okay, they're skipping all these steps because it's taking too long. Like, who's going to
Mm,
log into 5 different things just to enter in one number?
right.
Nobody.
Right. Or the
Nobody.
risk of, duplicative or like getting one number off, especially if there's a lot of manual entry, right?
Right.
That's an interesting point. Something, I wanted to talk to you about or want to ask you really is like you're kind of touching on some of these things, but when a firm comes to you, you know, inquiring about operational issues, like what are kind of just to give the audience a little bit of a scope for it, what are the more common things or the main things, I guess, that they come and ask you about? Like if they're coming and looking for help for operations, where do they tend to start, I guess, right? What are they coming to you with?
I think the two areas that typically show up is the beginning of the sales cycle and then the
Mhm.
end of the sales cycle. So like the work, the legal work itself is like usually fine. They're lawyers. They know how to do
Right.
law. They know how to do that stuff. But when it comes to the sales process and
Mhm.
tracking the sales process and figuring out all that stuff, it can get very overwhelming because like they didn't go to law school run a sales team,
Right.
right?
Wasn't the
Right.
dream.
So yeah,
Yeah.
the intake and the CRM and like all that, like it can get very overwhelming because there's so many moving pieces and like the full sales funnel is like so many different parts and you
Mhm.
have to like do all these different things and there's so much data and it can get very, very overwhelming. And so a lot of times it's like the sales and like the intake, the CRM, and we're figuring that out. And then other times it's AR.
Yeah.
And that's very typical too, because well, I mean, like I talk to a lot of family law firms just like you do. And like
Sure.
because of I think the nature of the practice,
Yeah.
it's just like, you got two people, they're fighting each other, at least in the state of California, the assets can get tied up, people don't
Hmm.
got money, and then like it's hard to pay you, and then like it's all of it's like very emotional and very difficult to like
Absolutely.
deal with. And so um figuring out like like all those different processes and like getting people on the same page and then like training your team to kind of like do things smoothly and reliably and repeatedly. And I think that that's kind of like the
Mhm.
really hard part, because like I'm not going to name any names, but quite a number of law firms where like they can make millions of dollars in revenue, but like internally every single day they're putting out fires
Right. Isn't
every
that
single day.
wild? Kind of
Yeah.
especially I mean, you go through it in a few ways. We're a small team, as you know, and so I feel like I'm still living a lot of the, for those listening, that you're wearing multiple hats, right? Like have this background in sales, became a business owner, have leveled up in a lot of ways, and that's very exciting. But, we're doing content right now, right? So I'm a sales guy turned content guy turned business, like not necessarily didn't expect to find myself in
Right.
this situation and or on podcasts or or even sometimes writing copy or helping design features right of like
Right.
what are we going to launch next week or next month and then but at the same time I feel like there have to be systems in place right to get a little bit of your life back right because for me actually I fell into the trap of and I've heard attorneys say this because I have this sales background that's the last thing I wanted to let go of right because
Yeah.
that is my superpower. Like I lived it for forever. Like since right out of
Right.
college, I went into sales basically, and since then I've been doing it. So, and you actually met my kind of first AE hire, a few
Yeah.
months ago. We were out at
Yeah.
ABA Tech Show, right? And so we had luckily a chance to win that startup alley competition. But since then, things have been very different, which is interesting. So I hired this AE have been giving him a ton of autonomy and agency to like make new decisions that I'm like, "Oh, I'm very uncomfortable. I wouldn't do that." No, but letting it play out, right? And
Yeah.
so giving that trust over and why? So that we can have a process that isn't Matt sells everything, right? And
Yeah.
then like, we were at a point where we had a big unlock last year, and you've heard this from me personally, but we had a really great breakthrough on paid advertising and just inbound leads. Like we finally kind of hit the messaging, some things were really going well. And then it became my calendar became the limiting factor, right? And this
Mhm.
happens to attorneys a lot, right? Like there no more legal work can get done because the one attorney is that is the service provider.
Yeah.
Well, if the service provider is also spending all of their time on admin, maybe it's non-billable work, you might want to think about it that way, utilization rate type things. But yeah,
Yeah.
if all you're able to do is this thing and you're the only one in the building who can do it, well, you've got some problems, especially when you get pulled
Yeah.
in six different directions. And I was living that nightmare like every week.
Yeah.
Last year was really hard for me. Like burnout was getting really, really close at hand. And so I think all of these things aren't just hypothetical, right? So, at the end of the day, I think these are problems we feel that are visceral, and then now we have to translate it though, and that's where I think you come in.
Yeah, I think a lot of founders, they have like a scope of genius, whatever that is. For you, it's sales. For someone else, it's like legal work. For someone else, it might be solving accounting problems or some anything like that. And
Absolutely.
oftentimes, as the as the founder starting off, for anybody that's kind of like under that like I want to say like 5 million mark, in terms of revenue, like you are wearing all of these multiple hats. And so your main job as the founder, you're really supposed to just be setting the strategy and the vision. Like that really should be your main job. And like, of course, like as you're building things up, you're going to be doing the things that you're really good at, just to fill in that role. But like as you grow, as you know, that stops being possible because some of those functions of the business, and every business has, the same functions, sales, operations, finance. Some of those things need to be taken off your plate so that someone else can do it. So you can really focus on the main thing, which is strategy and vision. And like for a lot of founders, what you really need to do, like you got to take that stroke of genius, like the thing that you're really, really good at, and then turning that into a process. And what you need to do is you got to just start. It's a little bit philosophical because like this document becomes your training manual and your hiring and your culture. So like taking those things that you really care about during, like for example, the sales process and breaking it down into decision trees. And it's like, okay, if I get this input, what decision would Matt make? And then you got to train your guy to do the same thing. Cause then like I don't want to say, oh, you're like copying yourself or whatever, but it's really like, taking your values and training it into another person so that your company can continue to grow and you stay focused on what you really need to stay focused on, which is strategy and vision.
Right. And hopefully copy the best parts and get rid of the no, find someone who's another word. Well, because, again, as much as I love like sales in this example, I can't help myself but like work in other parts. This is how I ended up, in this business owner position.
Right.
And it's funny because then sometimes you get so for attorneys, it's so locked into the legal work that you don't get a chance to grow as
Yeah.
an individual, as a professional. And
Yeah.
I think that evolution to CEO, right, or however you might describe yourself, or
Yeah.
business owner, there's a few, same idea with slightly different flavors. But you don't give yourself this opportunity to expand. Why? Because sometimes it's scary and there are things that you're not good at. And like financial modeling, I hate. No. And so thank you, Claude, for Excel.
Valid.
Now, things have gotten a little bit easier actually now, right? With tooling
Yeah.
in the market to do these things that you're not so good at. But yeah, I think that you have to be thinking that way. And I love the way you talked about it as a decision tree, kind of instilling your values. And then yeah, obviously you want to hire great people who represent those values and just remember like this is your baby and this is your thing and you get to have an opinion. And I think that's something I actually struggled with of like, oh, as a company, it shouldn't just be Matt's opinion. And of course it shouldn't, it is bigger
Yeah.
than just me. But
Yeah.
what makes great companies great is, and sometimes they're opinionated, right, about how a thing
Yeah.
should be done
Yeah.
and, what values that, they represent or represent them rather for the company. And you're not going to be for everybody, right? And that's
Right.
something I really struggle with, maybe some childhood trauma, some people pleasing. No, but kind of, like too real. No, but probably. And but yeah, you want to make it so because you're kind of taught in some ways in business circles like you got to make it available to everyone and accessible, and of course in the general sense you want to be available for as many clients as you possibly can, but not every client's a good client, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's a crazy concept, right? That we're especially in the early days, like we're still small, it feels like every dollar matters, like there's a use for it. Man, just a few more deals this month could really change our fortunes or our growth strategy. But it's not actually maybe how you get there, really, which is fun. Chasing every dollar leads to no dollars, which, as you
Yeah.
know, like you were one of our very first legal clients. We used to be like a super generic shop, like, come
Yeah.
on, plumbers and HVAC and marketing and legal and startups and we weren't growing at all. Like it took
Yeah.
took actually putting the
Yeah.
blinders on, like you said. Um,
It's
so
guidelines.
yeah. So
It's
I
guidelines.
kind of talking about that, maybe that's a segue there of like a trap that, you know, business owners kind of fall into, but I'm sure there's so many more. So, if they're really good at what they do, right? They're working really hard, they're, putting out great, they're ethical, these are good business owners doing great work, but they still get stuck, right? Like what do you think? And we've touched on a few of these things, but like what do you think are some of these pitfalls like that most of these firm owners are falling in right now that they might not even be aware of? They're kind of artificially creating a ceiling for their growth when, but I'm working really hard. I might be the best at what I do in some ways, right? This happens a lot. Like, but I'm this big, and no one can find me, and these sorts of things. But you might be an incredible
Oh,
attorney,
hello.
but limiting yourself. Oh, did we lose you? Are we
Oh,
back?
yep. Now we're back.
Okay, cool. Had a little fun. audio issue there. So let me, yeah, I'll restate that one and we'll kind of edit that, I think. But, I want to talk about sort of the traps, like the pitfalls, right? What are some things that business owners who are really good at what they do, these attorneys are really killing it in that legal work side of things, right? They know what they're doing, they're experts, that is their area of genius. But we've touched on a few of these, but in your experience, what are some of the biggest traps that these firm owners are falling into that they're really kind of creating a ceiling for them, right? That they probably
Yeah.
aren't realizing it.
Yeah, I think a lot of owners don't really understand what operations really is supposed to do for them.
Mm,
And like they think it's like this kind of like big corporate thing. Oh, we're too small to need anything like that. Really what good operations is like just having guidelines for your team and like creating like like a predictable uh but a space for people to work. And I think like a lot of smaller firms, they tend to be very reactionary. Like a problem comes up and then like they react to it and they solve for that problem in the moment and they make whatever decision they need in the moment to kind of like get rid of that problem because the firms are kind of in survival mode. They're like just kind of like just like reacting to whatever's happening in front of them. So like say for example, let's say for example, a firm they are they have a client that owes them like $15,000, right? Client hasn't paid in 3, 4 months. They have another trial coming up. So and you're laughing because you've heard of this before. So
I've
they
heard
have
this one
another
before.
trial
Yeah.
coming up. They have another trial coming up, and then what do you do in that moment? And like because you don't have a process in place, you're like calling the client, constantly like, hey, can you pay? Hey, can you pay? Hey, can you pay? And then they get to that point where it's like now you're kind of scrambling for a solution and you're scrambling to either decide to like get out of the case or you're scrambling to um, you know, uh get them to pay and you're trying to make deals and you might not be making a good deal with them. You might just you might be making a bad deal just so you could kind of like get over the stress of that current problem. And like a lot of times like that ends up putting people in a worse place than they were before.
Mm,
So, on the opposite end of that, if you had, a process in place where, like you can expect, okay, if a client goes over balance and they've been over balance by $2,500 for 30, 60 days, we're already calling by that
right.
point.
Right.
We're already speaking to that person by that point at the very beginning and not until the problem becomes that big. Or when if you have policies and guidelines and training in place where it says like, oh, okay, if this person hasn't paid in 30, 60 days, then we're going to actually pull ourselves away from the case already
Right.
before the trial is there. Or if you set up decisions and like guidelines for what happens when, for whatever reason they can't pay, you've already made the decision beforehand that like, okay, we're going to start them off on a payment plan. And this is the payment plan that we need at this point so that, we don't get to that problem. That's really what operations really is. It's
Mm.
like creating decisions and process beforehand to deal with the problem so that every single time you can predict that that's what's going to happen and every person in your firm knows that that's what's going to happen.
That's
That's
so
really
well.
all. Yeah, it's
That's
really all what operations is.
That's so well said. You use the term decision there a lot, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's perfect because, this has been on top of mind recently. I mean, basically always. There's a lot of decision-making fatigue for business owners, right? And firm
Yes.
owners. I'm exhausted all the time, and there's an easy like had more hair when we started. No, and that's true actually, but less gray perhaps. But I think it's the decision-making fatigue
Yeah.
that really leads to burnout. And this is something that I'm facing. I've always been, we want to create great content and put out this image of like, we're so good
Yeah.
at this thing and we're really great at what we do. But I'm a real human being running a business and it is awful sometimes. Like it really is. And I think we have to talk about it, right? We can't, the veneer is not helpful, right? Like that's at least not my stance on any of it anyways.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, no, this is the hardest thing I've ever done, and it's cost me a lot, like
Yeah.
emotionally, financially, like a lot of things, with relationships
Yeah.
and these things. And it's yet there's a reason I'm doing it, and it drives me. But I think we gotta speak clearly about it. But what I love, just to go back to what you said, is the decision tree, pre-making the decisions so that when confronted with the situation, the decision's actually already made. And
Yeah.
then the freedom that comes from that, because yeah, if I think about it too, a customer has an issue and we have this, it's like, okay, in the world, I don't want to make it too much about us, but like we integrate with the practice management systems like Clio in my case and others. Well, we're limited by basically what info we can get from their APIs. And that's a
Right.
lot, like, 85, 90% of the time, that's fantastic. But there's corner cases where like, ooh, we didn't know that this weird set of things could come
Right.
together and it
Right.
breaks something. Well, then our product side, which is small, and my co-founder, like feel like they have to do something immediately, right? Because these are our clients. And we care deeply about our clients, but then I feel like we're immediately, and just as you said earlier, in reaction mode.
Right.
And this is something that we're, growing and maturing over here, where sometimes you got to triage it. And unless it
Yeah.
is truly a four-alarm fire and it's gonna,
Yeah.
shut down their business or ours, or, or something, obviously, then it's all hands on deck. But when we react so quickly to
Yeah.
everything that comes through our door, like it's kind of like if everything's important, then nothing's important. If
Exactly.
everything's a fire, then nothing actually is. It's always just on fire. Like you're the dog with the dumpster, like this is fine. And so, anyways, if you know, on that reference, but
Yeah.
and so, yeah,
It's that quadrant, right? It's important, not urgent. Uh and then there's not important, urgent, and
right,
there's important, not or not not important, not urgent, and like
right. And
the
you got
last
to
one.
triage. If it's
Yeah, you
important and
really have
urgent, then maybe we got to move right now. But if it's
really that's the
important but
only
not
that's the
urgent,
only time. Yeah,
yeah,
you set it to the side and you deal with it later. But really, I think what a lot of firm owners really struggle with is that they are the decision maker on way too many things.
true.
Way, 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 way too many things. What do we do with AR? What do we do with payroll? What do we do? Like when this person comes to me with this problem, with a client comes to me with this problem, what do we do? You already know the decisions you would make every single time.
Just have to
You probably,
document them, right? Yeah, this is where I fail at this too, by the way. So
yeah,
that's why I always feel like I'm like cheerleader while I'm learning at the same time
yeah,
of making content, because it's true. Like yeah, it's all in here and that's exhausting, right? I'm just like I felt it, and I think so many firm owners have, of like you're just like, somebody come save me, like it's some days, not most days, but there are many where you're like, I'm just, God, somebody come make this decision for me. But I think what you said is so true, right? Like, the decision, you are the authority on this. Doesn't mean you
yeah,
have to be the executor all the time, right?
right,
So that's hiring, that's delegation, that's different, especially for repeatable processes and dynamic environments like legal. But you're still the buck stops with you, right? At the end of the day.
yeah.
So but you
But
can set those decisions down, document them, which I think is probably one of our biggest failings, actually, like, or in this journey. Like, we're getting better at it all the time, but I think what's caused me the most stress is a lot of what you're saying is like the decision tree mapping. Like,
yeah,
and then because I feel like I'm inventing the same answer, but it still feels like I'm inventing it every time, or like coming up with it. Whereas, yet, if you look back, like you said, probably been pretty consistent in my judgment on those things,
yeah,
but just
yeah.
didn't relieve myself of the burden of having to make the decision, right?
Right, exactly. So like it's like, if like you have to make one decision one time where it's like, okay, if like we're gonna go back to AR because like, it's very relevant to us. If a client is over $5,000 for 30 days, every single client like that fits that model is going to receive this kind of process, treatment, whatever it's going to be. And so then you don't have to make that decision like again, like your team can make that decision. They know the
Right.
guideline is $5,000, 30 days. And there might be edge cases, but that's when it comes to you. So then like it becomes the 80% is your team. And then the 20% is, okay, I really actually have to look at this. And having that escalation is what really makes the difference between you running your business and the business running you.
Well said. So I think that's an interesting segue to, I mean, we've touched on a few of these. You just gave one, but I'd like to keep going on that, which is, you know, for someone listening right now, like what are some small little like bite-sized ways to get started, right? They've got 30 minutes on a Monday, or whatever their admin day might be. They have some time. I feel like when not just in creating this content, but attending content like this, I feel like this, you've seen this. We've been at a few conferences together. You attend
Yeah,
these sessions, you're like, that was the best thing I've ever seen. But then
yeah,
also I'm so overwhelmed. Like, how do I begin? So that's really the question is what are some actionable next steps? What are some things that firm owners could just take a little bite out of? And I'm a big fan of like better over perfect, right? And just,
yeah,
done, not perfect. There's a few ways
yeah.
to say that, but yeah, what's your advice for those listening to just kind of start chipping away at this in actionable ways?
I think like making a guideline on like your AR stuff. Like at what
Hmm.
point do you start calling? And like if you guys don't have a process right now, make a decision on what that is. Whether that's like, 1 day overdue, 2 days overdue, 3 days, or whatever it is. And like at what point are you going to start escalating? And who do you escalate it to? So like, the example I gave earlier, which is like, decide if people are over, they're $2,500 overdue, we got to start calling, or, they got to bring someone like you on where someone goes in and like helps create that process. Because like one of the things that like really a lot of firms struggle with is the manpower to make some of these calls, as you know.
Hmm. Sure.
And it's like they know someone needs to do it, and they want to train someone to do it, but they don't have the time because they're already putting out the fires, and like every single month they're bleeding money,
Right.
right? And like when you're bleeding money and like you're not collecting on work that you've already done, then it becomes just like it's very disheartening, and you're not incentivized to really work harder because you're like, I'm not even collecting on the money that
Right.
I already made. So I think really digging into like your own AR process, I think that's something that every firm owner could do. Whether that's something as simple as like a policy change where like if you have like a trial coming up for someone, charge them 3 times your normal return. Just charge them 3 times your normal retainer. And then like you don't have to worry about whether or not you're gonna have enough money because like, okay, I've already charged them three times the amount, and like we don't have to worry that they're not going to pay.
Right.
So it's really about like policies and creating a process and figuring out like how things will escalate. So I'd say like if someone's listening to this right now, take a look at your retainer policy. What do you have on there right now regarding and like you know what types of cases tend to like start racking up a lot of money, whether
Right.
that's like it's got a trial coming up, or you talk to these people and like they're very contentious and that like they're just not going to let it go. Like you can tell that they're going to cost you a lot. So I would say take a look
Well
at your
said.
retainer policy and just like, does this match what is going to happen in the case, and make an adjustment there. And that's fast, like you don't it's not going to take you super long to make a couple of those decisions because you already know how what your clients are like.
I think that's well said. And something I tell people when we do, CLE on this topic and things like that is start with new clients. It's really hard to like
Yeah.
get an old client to do, an old dog, new tricks kind of thing,
Yeah.
change payment processes. If you are in a practice area listening to this where you have a lot of really long-term clients that are going to stay with you for a very long time, you may
Yeah.
have to go to work on this. And it is a little more challenging. But for those where, it tends to be more new clients than anything, then they
Yeah.
don't know, right? I
They
mean,
don't know.
this will feel bad, but like, we updated our pricing recently. Like we hadn't raised prices in 5 years or something crazy,
Mhm.
like an insane amount of time, just because I don't know, I always felt bad doing it. I feel like it's this thing, but things have gotten more expensive around the whole world. Like, I'm paying more at the pump personally. Like we all are, we know this, but
Yeah.
like this is as business owners, I was like, oh, I don't want to raise my prices. I don't like that. It doesn't feel fair. But like our costs went up. And like, so then you kind of think, well, why are we the only victims of like, of costs going high? Like, why are we choosing to not, raise our prices? Not an astronomical amount, but just to right size it for where things are. But then you know what? Like net new clients had no idea, right? Because they don't
No.
know. They have no basis of understanding of who you are, how you do business, what it costs. what the expectations are around retainers, how much they should put down initially, what replenishment looks like. And I think we unfortunately all know we know the long history, right? I've been doing this a decade. I know every little skeleton and every mistake. And it's like, wow, I've just got a bunch of baggage. Like the new client has no idea. They either like what you're doing or they don't, right? Based on
Right.
your marketing and your services and your reputation. And so I think it's so good to remind people of that too. Like it's okay. They don't know. Like just
They don't.
think it through and make a change and then test it too. That's what I
Yeah.
always, I kind of give myself some, I don't know, I overthink some things a lot. I think many founders do. And like we could just change it back. If no one buys
Yeah.
ever again, I'm like, well, we found the ceiling on the price, like which we haven't, and no one even said anything. And I went, should we have raised it more? No. Anyways, but
You
so
still can. You
there are
still can.
some out there who feel like
There's
they're like
companies after this.
until you start
You
getting
don't know.
told no a lot, it's really not high enough, and you're like, oh my goodness. I'm like, it gives me like heart palpitation. No, but I think that these are the that's why these conversations are so important, right? I think folks listening to this, like, I think of myself as a cheerleader for law firms, like reminder, and all business owners, like, because I am one, and that's why I love hanging out with folks like you and the attorneys themselves who are running these firms, because we're literally all in this together, and we're just going through almost all the same trouble, and I think I just want to be more honest and open about it and vulnerable at times. Not everyone likes that approach, but I just don't think that you can get through it without like a little business therapy from founder friends. I feel like um
You have to, because otherwise it's very isolating. It's very much like,
it
oh my
is.
God, am I the only one that's like going through this? And it's very hard because like you're the only one that is in this position at
Right,
your firm, unless you have like, co-owner, co-founder or something like that. But then,
right.
even then, like depending on your role, like things are a bit different for, you and your co-founder, whoever it is.
Absolutely. And it's sort of a tangent, but just to keep going on that thought is like most of my friends aren't business owners, right? Like my wife's not a business, like there's just, yeah, it is isolating, right? You kind of, if you're not surrounded a lot, but I certainly have founder friends, and that's been very helpful because, yeah, you're like, I'm trying to run a business, raise a family, I have young kids, like, and I'm losing it all, or like holding on barely, like, but, we make it work, but I think more people are in that position than not,
Yeah.
in terms of like just doing their best. And I think it's good to riff on that. So, let's kind of, I don't know, as we kind of wind this thing down a little bit. I mean, we talked about some practical tips. I love that folks can just get started on something, a small change, reminding themselves that this is like brand new to any new clients. There's no basis for comparison.
Yeah.
Just test it, right? And come back to it if it doesn't work or tweak it. Um, any thoughts? I mean, so it may be the same thing, I guess, on the AR side, which is obviously near and dear to my heart. But, between that and what are some other, I don't know, sort of tweaks or changes that unlock the kind of outsized benefits. Obviously, AR cash flow, I know and think about that a lot. But any others that you feel like are big levers for firms, like if they can just focus a little bit on this, they tend to have an outsized return.
Hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of parts. Let me think. Something I think. I want to answer this one thoughtfully because I want to make sure people get something good from this.
Sure, you can take a minute on
Mm.
that.
Yeah, AR is definitely a really big one.
It makes sense, right? Get
I
paid for
think
your work. Obviously, I'm horribly biased on this topic, but I do
I
think
mean,
that,
yeah,
yeah, if you get the
think
money and you're owed, then it unlocks a lot of other initiatives like marketing or growth
right.
or taking a vacation or whatever you want it to be, right?
Yeah, I think it really depends, but I think AR is definitely the biggest one. If a company
Mhm.
doesn't like have an AR issue, then obviously like, they're handling that part right. But I think um
Maybe it goes back to that intake
maybe
side, right? That you were talking
maybe
about.
intake. I think maybe could also be what is the one thing? I think gosh, it can be so different because so many firms have slightly different issues.
Sure.
I
Practice
think
areas matter a lot.
it's really hard. It's that's a really hard question to answer because I
Sure.
think it really depends on what each firm is really trying to achieve.
That's fair.
Uh
It's like asking for the silver bullet too. So, but
yeah,
I think
yeah,
we found one in AR, and then by practice area, it's going to be different. But yeah, I think it's a good point. The things that you've said today have resonated so much of like it depends on what hurts the most too, right? And that is sort of interesting. Like you have to look through two lenses of like what does the business most need? That's one thing because it's
Yeah,
sort of objective perhaps, but there's really
yeah,
no objectivity at the end of the day, right? Because you're the
yeah.
business owner and how you feel really matters. That sort of sets it. But I think the other side is, yeah, what hurts? What do I like least about my experience as being a business owner? And if it's just cortisol levels, which might be my answer, no, it's just like really high stress, right? Then I think that's what we're talking about. Um,
I
okay.
think I think it really has to come down to a couple of different things. Like
Mm,
the first thing that I look at is always, is there a problem that puts the business at risk?
fair. Very
That
fair.
is like the big thing, that like the livelihood, the survival of the business.
Well said.
So whatever that thing is, whether that is AR, or if there's some compliance issue, or if it could just be capacity, people that people are not allocated properly,
Hmm.
or if the firm owner is the one doing everything, whatever that is really putting the business at risk, that is going to be the big thing that you will really want to focus on. Because like some of those things, like changing your policy on your retainer is great, but like that's like a small efficiency thing. But like
Hmm.
you got to really take a step back and look at what is really putting your business at risk. And for some firms, it is like AR, because like they don't have the revenue, that, and then they're like just they're really bleeding money,
Right.
and like that puts the business at risk. So if it's AR, then that would be the thing. So that's always the lens that I take a look at whenever I'm diagnosing a firm.
That
It's
makes a
whatever.
lot of sense. And it ties back kind of perfectly, I think, to what you said at the beginning. And as we kind of wrap up, you know, let's solve for survival first, because this is like the hierarchy of needs, right? Like if our survival is actually a question mark right now, we
Yeah.
can't process anything else,
No,
luxuries or
no,
efficiencies or things like that.
no.
And when we talk about, having that freedom, right, to run a business and enjoy the process, you can't do that if you're living through the lens of survival only. And so I think that that's just like the perfect throwback, or tie back to what we talked about earlier. So,
Yeah.
start there and then we upgrade. It's sort of what do I mean, I'm not the first one
That's
who had
right.
this thought, but let's just upgrade our problems, right? Like we need to continually upgrade you're always gonna have problems if you run a
Yeah.
business. Like if you don't want any problems, you picked the wrong path, and that's okay, but
Yeah.
we just need better problems, more interesting and ideally better problems, right?
Yeah.
So as we kind of close this out, I think that's perfect and really hits on the theme here. But before I kind of ask you, how folks can find you, get in touch with you, just in the spirit of the show. So as we kind of wrap this out, what is the one thing, if you had to pick one, that you wish every law firm knew about operations?
I think I think we really touched on this. I think what I want people to know about operations is just decisions. Like pre-made decisions. Pre-made decisions that your team and everybody knows, and you're all operating from those same decisions. And so when you're all operating from those same decisions, and like all those decisions are already made, then like you know what to expect. It makes things predictable, and it makes things less chaotic, and like that things are going to happen the same way every single time because those decisions are made. That's really what a system is. It's like, okay, client comes in, uh what is their case about? Do we take this case? Yes, no. And then just creating a lot of more of those like yes nos, and you can really like map all of this out, which that's something I love to do. But I guess not everybody loves to do that, and that's why I have my job.
That's right. They need us.
So
A lot of people
really,
don't like AR either, so I think that's how
yeah,
we, yeah, I
yeah,
totally get that.
yeah. So
Amazing.
really, operations is just a bunch of decisions that are already made, and
And that
like,
translates to the freedom that you're so passionate about, right? For
yeah,
helping these businesses find it. It's like systems get to scale, get to that freedom, right? So
yeah.
I love that mission and I love that messaging. So, Mickey, where can people find you? Where can they find Odium Advisors? How do they get in touch if they want to learn more?
Yeah, so our website is otiumadvisors.com. My calendar is there. You can also email me directly if you want, Mickey at otiumadvisors.com. I am on LinkedIn. You can follow me on LinkedIn as well. And yeah, that's that's really where you can find me.
Awesome. We'll put all that in the notes. Miki, my friend, my long time, the full cycle, first episode, first really maybe the very first legal client, if not the first very, very near. So thank you for coming with me on this journey in a couple ways. Thanks for being a guest and for kicking off this series with me. I really appreciate you coming on board.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. This has been a lot of fun.